Thank you so much. I'm going to call this meeting to order. And as a reminder about meeting etiquette, the meeting is being live streamed on the CPRC YouTube channel. So we ask everybody in the room and also online identify themselves each time they speak during the meeting to comply with the virtual meeting laws. I personally think the virtual folks sometimes get the short shrift in these kind of meetings. So I'm going to try to endeavor to make sure that they feel included, and if they want to speak up, I'll try to call on them and make sure they're recognized. All the votes, because it's a virtual meeting, all the votes will be conducted via roll call to comply with the laws around virtual meetings, and Beth will call the roll each time a vote is needed. It's time for the roll call vote for this meeting. So I'll hand it over to Beth.
All right. Let me know if you're here. Aberdeen.
Will Mulaney, Aberdeen, present.
Anger. Apex.
Brett Gant, present.
Archer Lodge. Benson.
Cassandra Stack, Benson, present.
Broadway.
Thomas Beal, Broadway.
Harborough.
Present.
Carthage. Erie. Chapel Hill.
Here.
Chatham County.
Lewis Bailey present for Siler City.
Sorry. Clayton. Durham, City of Durham. Durham County. Fuquay Varina. Hillsborough.
Kathleen Ferguson, Hillsborough, present.
Holly Springs.
Tim Forrest, Holly Springs, present.
Johnston County.
Rich Slaughter, Johnston County, present.
Kenley. Nightdale.
Mark Swan, I'm here.
Lee County.
Bill Carver, present.
Micro.
Katie Garcia for Micro, present.
Moore County. Morrisville.
Donna Fender, Mooresville, here.
Orange County. Pine Level. Pinehurst.
Pioneers, Jeff Morgan speaking. Here.
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, Pamela Baldwin, present.
Princeton.
Princeton, Stacy Johnson, here.
Raleigh. Robbins. Rollsville.
Ronnie Kern, present.
Sanford. Selma.
Myron McAllister, Selma, present.
Smithfield.
Andy Moore, Town of Smithfield, present.
Southern Pines. Bass. Wake County.
Susan Evans, present.
Wake Forest.
Nick Slowinski, present.
Wendell. Whispering Pines. Wilson's Mills.
David McGowan for Wilson's Mills, present.
Zebulon.
Shannon Baxter, present.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, everyone, for that. Forgot to mention at the beginning, my name is Brett Gant. It's my honor to be the chair of this of the CPRC Board of Delegates for this year. One of the things that I thought about, and if I was the mayor of Apex, this is what I do too, is a little bit of like a fun fact. I want everybody to have a fun fact at the beginning of the meeting about what our organization does. And I asked Lee to come up with a fun fact for today, and instead of one fun fact, he put together and Beth and others, I think, did a great job, overachieved. Put together a flyer, and maybe this is also for the virtual folks, they got a copy of this, a flyer about a get to know Central Pines Regional Council organization. Now, I realize that a lot of us, we have our elected official positions and sometimes just get named as a delegate to this organization. And my hope is that these fun facts, and especially these amazing fact sheets, can help us appreciate this organization, what we do, and get more involved as a group in this organization. So I'm not going to read it, but I think it looks great, and it gives a great history and some of the things that we do as a CPRG. So I'd encourage everybody to take a close look at this. And thank you so much to Lee and Beth for that work. Okay, next is a review of the agenda. Everybody's gotten a copy of the agenda. We did have one change to the agenda, late breaking change. Maybe so we're talking about, Lee.
We have an additional item. I would ask that you add to item 4D. That would be a second sole source. 4E. That would be a second sole source exemption for DCHC and their executive directors here this evening to discuss both of those. And then if the board sees fit, I'd recommend that you place it on consent agenda for approval. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Do you want to have that discussion about what this item is now, or is
we'll have it during the business section.
During business. Okay, great. Does anybody have any other changes besides that one to the agenda they'd like to entertain?
Move to approve the amended agenda.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. I think that's enough to say the agenda is approved. Okay. Next, presentations. And the first one is a presentation recognition of past chair Butch Lauder. So it's my honor to recognize the past chair Butch. A little bit of background about Butch. He is from the western part of the state, near where I'm from. He has been a delegate to this board, both from Clayton and from Johnston County. Kind of we got a double dose of Butch in that way. Probably, I think, has a great perspective from both places. That's been of great value to this board. He has been an officer for 3 years, with the last one being the chair of the board. So, on behalf of the board, and yes, we have a gift for you, and I'd like to present this to you, and in appreciation for your service this past year.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I just thank you, past Chair Lauder, for your service. I don't know how he does it, because he's chair of the Johnston County Board of Commissioners. He has a very demanding job. He was chair of the COG. We talked every week on Fridays. He was moving into a new house. He's a granddad, husband. Yeah, Campo, right? But his attention and his enthusiasm for the work here, and I think what really impressed me about the past chair is his passion and his appreciation for the staff. The way he would thank staff, the way that he would understand the contributions that staff made to the work of the region, even though sometimes the work that staff does is sort of behind the scenes, right? They're not out in front sometimes. But past Chair Lauder understood that, and staff really appreciate how you recognized them and included them. And so for that, thank you. And thank you for the relationship that we had and the ability to be able to go to you with issues and have good conversations. So thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Butch. Another person I'd like to recognize is Will Mullaney, who is the immediate past, for the past 2 years, the secretary treasurer of the officers of this board. So Miss Laney, I believe, is on virtually. So we're sorry we can't give you this gift in person. Hopefully you can see it on the on the screen. But thank you for your service. A little bit about Ms. Laney. My understanding is she has been involved with the Board of Delegates since Aberdeen became a member of the Board of Regional Council. So long time amount of service provided to this board, very much appreciated. And like I said, the past 2 years has been Secretary Treasurer. So Ms. Laney, thank you very much. Lee, do you want to say anything?
Sure.
As well?
Ms. Laney, thank you for what you do, what you continue to do. So Ms. Laney not only represents the town of Aberdeen very well, she did so on this board, but she was also involved with our Tri-Cities group, which is where we go to Moore County and work with Aberdeen, Southern Pines, and Pinehurst, since those three communities share borders together and have a lot of common interests. Ms. Laney's been an active member of that group. I really appreciate how Ms. Laney asked really interesting and good questions, always has a great story to share, and equally just so positive and appreciative of staff. And it's always a pleasure to see her in person or virtually with a smile and a willingness to jump in and just being willing to fill an officer slot for 2 years was just such a tremendous help to all of us. So thank you very much, Ms. Laney, for your service. Appreciate it.
Ms. Laney, do you want to say anything, or anybody else on the board want to chime in? I see Ms. Baldwin popped up, but I'm not sure if that's for this or not, but welcome to hear anything. Okay. Ms. Laney, do you want to say anything?
Just that I enjoy being a part of the COG and learned a lot since I've been on the board. And I'll continue to learn and enjoy being with you guys.
Well, thank you very much. We value your presence on the board and as an officer previously. Okay, moving on. What you guys may have noticed in the past few meetings is that a lot of the business stuff of the meetings, a lot of that we've taken care of and switched it over to the executive committee of this board in the hopes that the meetings that we have here together in person are of value to kind of learn something that affects the region, affects individual municipalities or counties, and things you can bring back to your own local government. The third presentation is an overview of an effort by Central Pines related to regionalism and planning for our region for the future. So I'll pass this over to Lee for this one.
I'm going to hopefully take over screen sharing here. Forgot to do this last time. Stick with me for a minute. Awesome. Okay. So I want to talk to the board tonight about, and we're going to spend a good hour on this, on a regional vision for our region, and why I really believe that we're in a position and at a point where this is really important for us to have a conversation about. And I'm very appreciative of having a couple of my colleagues that will be joined or have joined us already, but we'll be talking about some efforts in their regions to do similar work. And I would really encourage the board, no decisions are being made tonight. This is really an opportunity to talk and to brainstorm and to think about some next steps. But really encourage you to ask questions, ask our guests any questions that they have or that you may have of them. And I can't pass up an opportunity not to have fun props. So when you get a chance after the meeting, come over to the table and take a look at a few things. So this concept of regional planning and regional visioning, you'll see in the Get to Know CPRC that's why we were created as the Research Triangle Regional Planning Commission back in 1959, is to help the local governments think about, well, this thing called RTP actually takes off and becomes something. What's the impact on the communities? And we actually did a plan. This is the plan. 1969 Research Triangle Region Development Guide. And it contemplated growth and water and sewer and roads and all sorts of stuff for the 3 counties, Wake, Durham, and Orange, that were very integral to the park. And I don't believe since then, there's really been another adopted, implemented regional vision or plan. So I think we may be ready for another plan. All right. So, but I don't want to say nothing's been done. There's a lot of great work that's gone on in the region, right? There's a lot of collaboration, a lot of good things. In Triangle J, Central Pines, we've done some good work. We did the world-class region conferences in the late 80s and early 90s. Some things that came out of this were Triangle Transit Authority, which is now Go Triangle. We're part of the conversations, greater water and sewer collaboration. There were some really great things that came out of these discussions. Actually, former Governor Jim Hunt and former Mayor of Raleigh, Avery Upchurch, helped chair these conferences. In the late 90s, we did Which Tomorrow Will You Choose? And this was all about, hey, the region's growing. What are like 3 scenarios that could be possible for growth? And how do you feel about those different scenarios? So we had a lot of conversation about the different scenarios, and it's interesting looking at this map that 540 that goes right outside our office was being discussed at that point. And there's a little dotted line down here about the possibility of another connecting freeway, which is about to open in the next month and a half, 2 months. So, you know, really thinking about the future. There's also some examples of other regional efforts outside of North Carolina. One you'll hear about tonight is the MORPC Insight 2050. I know Andrew's here to talk about Wasatch Front, but here's an example from the DC area around regional planning, and then also for the Bay Area. So fun stuff to look through. If you don't get to it tonight, it will be in our Pine Preserves library where you can go sit and take a look. But I just wanted to talk through some things around Connected Region and what we're thinking about and why we believe it's so important right now to continue this discussion about how we're growing together as a region. So let's talk about population. I don't think I'm going to surprise anybody here, but let's just talk about it. You know, I think we're growing a little bit, right? So we've been growing since the year 2000, even before that. So here are some snapshots, and we're talking about Connected Region. We're talking about the 7 counties that we serve, but we're also going to be including Harnett, Granville, and Franklin in those in this analysis. So this is a 10-county look. So these statistics are for 10 counties, all right? So starting out in 2000, about 1.5 million population, all right? So 5-year chunks. Yeah, we're growing, right? Yep, continuing to grow. We're growing. We're getting to current year, 2.5 million, just over 2.5 million. And then we're getting into projections for growth until 2050. It doesn't seem to be stopping. And what's interesting is if you think about the MSA in Baltimore, its current population, we will surpass that in about 2033, 34. We'll also, stop working here in the middle. There we go. Denver, its current MSA population, about 2035, 2036 timeframe. We're going to continue to grow into the 2040s. We're going to hit the San Diego current MSA population, maybe around 2040, 2041. And then we're going to just continue growing into 2050 when we're going to be over 3.5 million. And we're going to be approaching the current MSA population for Minneapolis, St. Paul. So back in 2000, population about 1.5, projections for the 10 county area in 2050 is a population of just shy of 4 million, 3.7 million. A lot of growth, right? All right. So the question, I want y'all to vote. So probably the easiest way to do this, let me hit the instructions here. You can do a QR code, or you can send a text to 22333, and in the message of the text, you can say Lee Worsley 319. Because I'd like for y'all to answer this question. Yeah, you know, and I'm not, this isn't like super critical. You're not weighing in. And I want to be mindful of your time. So I'll give you another 10 seconds or so, and then we're going to move on.
For the competitive people, it's important.
I know. Talking a little bit. All right, we're going to go to responses. Oh, people are responding. All right. Yeah. So which county in the 10 county area is projected to grow at the highest percentage from now until 2050? These answers are great. A lot of people think Johnston. Most people got it right. I don't know what Finkeland is.
All right, that was me.
That's all right. But you know,
I fat fingered it and then I
could be.
changed it.
There may be. Oh, did you vote twice?
I voted twice because I missed.
That's okay. That's okay. That's all right.
Oh,
Because you know what?
I voted 7 times.
Ms. Baxter, you're right.
It's Finkeland?
It's So, you know, a little bit of a, statistics you can sort of, right? But just think about percentage wise. It's Franklin County, 67% of growth through 2050. They're not in our region, technically, as a COG region, right? So I think part of what we're talking about here is that the growth is happening, obviously, within Wake, Durham, and Orange counties, but has expanded across the region. Franklin County, 67% growth. Moore County, 62% growth. Johnston, sorry, you're third, 54%.
It's got a medal.
I don't know, that may be a prize you like or not, but Wake at 53, Chatham at 41. Even the slowest projection, Orange, is still 25%. Huge amounts of growth, okay? So total population of the region, an increase from today of about 1.2 million. So we're basically going to drop in from now to 2050 and equal to the Hartford MSA or the Salt Lake City MSA or the Tulsa MSA, or Miss Evans, we're just going to add another Wake County to the region, okay? A lot of growth, a lot of growth. So what's this thing about regional planning, and is this something you just cooked up, Lee? No, it's being done all over the place. And I'm not saying, although we've got some New Yorkers in the house, I'm not saying the vision is to be New York, but New York's been planning regionally since the 1920s. So here's a little quick video about the regional plan in New York City.
In the 1920s, the tri-state metropolitan region was a dynamic center for commerce, manufacturing, and culture. But poverty and overcrowding were endemic. Industry was growing, along with pollution, traffic, and noise. Transportation innovations better connected New York City to Long Island, the Hudson Valley, New Jersey, and Connecticut. But growth was haphazard and inefficient, based only on market forces, rather than what would work best for the region overall. Civic leaders began considering how to reorder the region in a more rational way, and how to enhance quality of life across the entire metro area without regard to political boundaries. Charles Dyer Norton, a veteran of the Chicago Plan, said at the time, "No plan of New York will command recognition unless it includes all the area in which all New Yorkers earn their livelihood and make their homes." On May 10, 1922, a group of prominent planners and civic leaders met to create a comprehensive plan for New York and its environs. This group, called the Committee on the Regional Plan, recruited experts in architecture, engineering, law, public health, and social welfare. For the next 7 years, they surveyed and analyzed the region, developing a plan to make it a better place to live and work. In 1929, the committee formally incorporated as Regional Plan Association, or RPA, which was then charged with carrying out the plan's recommendations. Then, on May 27th, RPA's first president, George McEnany, presented the Regional Plan for New York and its environs to the public. The plan proposed an ambitious and elaborate network of highways, railroads, and parks. It explored urban design and the relationship of development to open space, buildings to streets, and pedestrians to vehicle traffic. It also underscored the importance of public education about planning and zoning. Many of the plan's recommendations were implemented over the years, forever altering the shape of our built and natural environment. More than anything, the first regional plan presented a new way of thinking about development and governance, inspiring a movement of regional planning in the country and abroad.
So I thought that was interesting that, even New York has had regional plans for a long time. And as I looked at it more, thinking about this, I was pleasantly surprised at how commonplace regional visions or plans are. And in fact, so I went and looked at every MSA, our size or bigger or larger, and this is Lee's scientific method, right? So I searched for a regional plan for each MSA, and if I could find it really easily, and it was like a COG sponsored, truly regional plan, I said, yep, they've got a regional plan. That's a handout that you have, are the ones that I found, and we can send this electronically to you. It has links to the plan on it. But what was really interesting is that as the regions got larger, the amount of regional plans increased. And so I talked about at the beginning, we're growing quite a bit. We're growing toward 4 million people in 2050. Of the regions that are 4 million or more, 71% of those regions have some sort of regional plan, regional vision to help the region talk about growth and how they're evolving together. So I just thought that was interesting. So again, it's not something that I've just sort of come up with, right? It's found in some rationale. I also want to point to our recent member survey, and I appreciate our member engagement team doing this. We've gotten a lot of great input already. We try to do a survey every year of our members to see how we're doing, what we can do better, what the membership is thinking about, right? Our mission is to serve you. And we purposefully asked a question about regional vision. We asked Please rate your agreement with the following statement. Our region has a cohesive vision for land use, transportation, housing, and open space. These are the results from the elected officials and the managers. We brought those out. So 71% of you and your managers were either neutral or negative toward the question. You said, I don't agree, I don't disagree, or I disagree, or I strongly disagree. 29% somewhat agreed, nobody strongly agreed with the question. So we're hearing from you around this, and this isn't being critical, or we're just stating facts here, right? And we have a plan on how to address that. So I really look up to these two individuals. I think they do a great job, not only with regional, if we want to learn about regional councils and some really cool work, I would pick out Morpsey and Wasatch Front. They're two very good directors and do some good work. William Murdoch is the director of Morpsey, which is the Columbus, Ohio Regional Council. He's going to talk a little bit about their Insight 2050 project. And then we're going to have Andrew Gruber, who's the director of the Wasatch Front Salt Lake City Regional Council. He's going to talk about the Wasatch Front Regional Council Wasatch Choice Plan. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And William or Andrew, I don't know who wants to go first, but thank you for joining us. And I'm going to hand it over to you all. Good to see you, William. Good to see you, Andrew.
Hey guys, Andrew, your choice.
William, you go right ahead.
Okay. Well, thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Lee, for the kind introduction. And hello, everybody from Columbus, Ohio. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. And I think this might work. And can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, I know we've got about 15 minutes here, so I want to share a little bit about what we're doing. But let me tell you that the admiration is mutual. Lee is emerged as a leader on the national level for us, and we admire what's happening at Central Pines. And two, know that we appreciate one of your delegates with Jennifer as the past president of the National Association of Regions. So you all have a voice that is much larger than just your region in helping us all around the country. So thank you for that. So again, I'm William Murdoch with the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. We like to say our friends call us Morpsey, so you all can call us Morpsey. Like you, we cover a lot of different topics in the Columbus, Ohio region, 15 counties, 88 member communities. Our board delegates works a little different. We have a board of 150 local government officials, and we do a lot of the activities that you do to help bring the region together. We always start with our values too. We believe in local government. We believe in public service. So everything we do is through that lens of paying it forward to help our local governments, to help them get in front of important regional questions, help them find resources. We call it drive investment, building that value. And there's a big regional push on prosperity and creating an environment for prosperity. But let me cut to the chase. We, like Raleigh and like Salt Lake, we are a growing region. We're not quite growing as fast as you all, but we are growing quickly. So for our region, we're often the fastest growing in the Midwest. If you look at that chart there, we expect to be a region of about 3.1 or 3.2 million people by 2050, which is about 750,000 more. For us, for Ohio, that's a lot more people, and it is a major topic of growth. This has been supercharged recently. Like some regions in the country, we've had some major project developments. Intel's building the nation's largest chip factory. Ohio State's trying to do that research triangle up north. Honda's global national headquarters is here, and they're building new factories. So there's a lot of focus on growth and what this looks like. And before I get into scenario planning, one of the things we do is, as a regional council, is we help the region process this. Instead of being afraid of it, see how they're connected, see how they can make a difference, take advantage of it, maybe get in front of it. And a simple way we do that, if you look at this, Columbus is in the middle of that diagram. And you can see the different colors refer to those three major projects I just talked about. Sometimes we have local government officials or community members say, oh, that Intel factory, that's way in that corner of the region. That's not going to impact us. But when we talk to Intel and say, where are your suppliers, where are your employees, they say 20 to 40 minutes. And so we've mapped that with drive time. And all of a sudden it goes from being that project out in one corner of the region to one that could drive growth in the whole region. And so we try to tell that story of, yes, it may live in one community, but it impacts everybody because the employers, the suppliers, they're going to be all over the region. This is not new for us. And we've been really trying to help the region see how growth can look, see their role in it. Just naming it is really important. Sometimes when you look at year-to-year forecasts, you miss that big picture. Like you were all saying, 1 million more people coming. Well, same for us. Like let's quantify, looking out a decade or two, what we think is going to happen. And as we have been talking for a decade, we want to grow better as we grow bigger. So we think we're a great place to live. We've been planning for it, but we know that we can do more. So I want to go back 10 years because our first foray into real regional visioning started in 2014. We brought in an urbanist, urban luminary, planning luminary named Peter Calthorpe. There are others. But he helped crystallize at a major event that if we are going to grow, let's learn how much we're going to grow, what it looks like, and then think about it in terms of what choices do we want to make now, whether it's infrastructure or housing or environment. Because if we don't, the growth may happen to us and all of those negative consequences. But if we can get in front of it, community by community, maybe we can make it work for us. And the way that we did that was through scenario planning. So this is what our effort was called, Insight 2050. We started in 2014. 2050 seemed a long ways away. It seems a little closer these days. But it was a partnership between our organization, Columbus 2020, which is our region's private economic development and business group, and then the Columbus area chapter of the Urban Land Institute. And they're really focused on design, good planning, good development. We brought in communities from across the region, and we focused them on this story of development and population growth and how we could get in front of that. Those were the three lead organizations, but kind of like I understand your connected region effort may be doing, we had so many partners. These are just the major ones: philanthropy, local governments, business leaders, to really make sure everybody was at the table talking about what this vision was and what the information showed. So I keep saying story because storytelling was the first part of this. It was really looking at the demographics, looking at this growth, naming it, saying what it was. For us, we looked at the core counties of the region. At the time, we were expecting 1 million more people. And that translates to hundreds of thousands of more households and jobs that are needed. That really captured the imagination of folks. And if I can be honest, it may have scared them a little bit too, because instead of 50,000 a year, all of a sudden it was 1 million more people. But it got their attention just telling the story of where we were headed. We dove into this demographically. We had a lot of leaders saying, well, we know how we've grown. We know how to do this. But the demographics had shifted. So at the time, we were looking back at the growth in the 1980s. And when we looked forward to the next 30 years, it looks a lot different. We know that our aging population is going to grow. We know that for us, actually, our younger cohorts were growing. We know that how people were living in different types of housing was going to shift. So the growth in the next 30 years, the demographics, and these are just raw numbers, looked a lot different than the last 30 years. So there became an effort to plan for 2050 instead of planning for 1980. This all led to a scenario planning effort. And what scenario planning is, I know Andrew is the expert on this and he'll go deeper, but we looked at, okay, well, if 1 million people are coming and the demographics are different, as a region, what if we looked at 4 different ways that we could grow? One was looking at scenario A, which is, let's look at how we've done it before. Scenario B was we gathered all the plans from all our communities. And we looked at what those plans were saying. And then we looked at 2 future options, with one leaning into where infrastructure was and being more efficient with growth, more focused. And one scenario where we looked at maximizing density and really taking an urban approach. just for sake of understanding what our options might look like. We did this on 8 major categories. And so this was a really intense effort looking at everything from fiscal impacts to greenhouse gas emissions to transportation, public health. So if we would grow in one of those 4 ways, what would it look like? And I want to just show you some of the examples at the time. One thing we looked at was land consumption. So this is turning farmland or green space into development. If you follow the graph here, A is in red. This is how we used to grow. If we added those million people, we'd eat up 495 square miles of green space. Our communities is already adjusted at the time, scenario B, so it was going to be less than that, but still pretty sizable, 270 miles just to accommodate that growth. But then when we dug into the scenarios, if we tweaked it just a little bit and grew around our infrastructure, we saw that we could save significant amounts of agriculture, which is really important to us in green space, to accommodate the same amount of people. So we did this for each level. These are some examples. Transportation, we're an MPO. We saw that if we were to grow as we would in the past, we need a whole lot more roads to move those million people. If we focus growth a little bit, we could actually have less to move the same people just as efficiently. We looked at pocketbook issues for local governments with how much does infrastructure cost to build? You add 1 million people, you need new infrastructure, you got to maintain it, you got to operate it. Same thing, if we were focusing growth where infrastructure was, it was going to be more efficient and cheaper. And we even looked at the household level too. So looking to see average household, could they save less, maybe through lower taxes, maybe through shorter commutes. We did this on all of those major categories, and it was really eye-opening for our communities at the time. It began to influence local government plans. And I should have said this earlier, we are a strong local government state. So as a regional planning community or council, we don't tell them what to do, but we give them the information to help them see it. We had communities start to see, hey, maybe this is a pocketbook issue for us. Maybe it's environmental. Can we grow differently? That also began to affect our regional transportation planning efforts as an MPO and some other things. This led to a second phase, which was focused solely on transportation and transit. And we dug into market research, looking at, well, what could we do differently? Our region is transit poor. We don't have a lot of options. And we looked at all of these new options coming on. Market studies were saying demographics wanted more options, whether aging and not able to drive, younger people wanting different options. So we took that seriously. We worked with realtors groups and others looking at preferences on what folks wanted out of their communities. And it led to these really simple region-wide visions of, well, we see that our residents want different things, different ways to get around. Walkability is really important to housing choices, the kind of amenities they wanted. And we were able to go back to that scenario plan and say, all right, well, if we're going to do transit differently, what does this look like on all those metrics? So again, we could give the region the ability to make solid choices grounded on the same kind of data, the same kind of information. I know I'm going through this quickly, but it is something that took a lot of effort to pull together just to have this common set, this common language. And we're really proud of how this helped people think about things like adding transit. You know, we looked at those metrics. It saved money on infrastructure. It actually improved tax revenues with development, better access to jobs, and so on. This is the timeline that we had. So that original Insight 2050 effort led to a transit effort, led to something called Insight 2050 Corridor Concepts. And this is where it gets really exciting because it turned from this planning effort that, yes, influenced our various plans and some of our investments, but it's turned into an $8 billion initiative that is actually going before the voters here in November called Link Us. So let's talk about Link Us, because this is where we, as a region, began to have this common vocabulary, this common vision, and how we could make it happen. So you'll see this initiative, even though it has a different name, it still is imbued with all of those common storytelling things. We're adding 1 million people. This is about affordability, both for local governments. This is about opportunity. It's about filling gaps in where the region's going. It's about growing better as we grow bigger. This initiative really honed in on that transit piece. There are a lot of different things you can do. This one focused in on mobility. Our residents wanted faster, more reliable transportation. They wanted safer, expanded bike and pedestrian paths, and they wanted walkable communities. And the initiative aimed to make that real. And what it is, it's an $8 billion initiative to build 5 rapid transit corridors. This is in a region that doesn't have any right now. It almost increases our transit system that we do have by 45%. It incorporates some new types of transit. It also is saving about a quarter of those dollars for those walkable communities. It's called transit supportive infrastructure. It's basically 500 miles of new sidewalks, bikeways, and trails. It's about $250 million. This is what's being put before the voters. And if and when this happens, it's very exciting for us as an organization because our transit agency is doing a lot of it. We actually were tasked with bringing all those local governments together to find out which projects were the priorities for sidewalks and trails. And if you can see that map, all those squiggly lines, those are projects that'll be funded just in the first 5 years. And so it's really made it real, taking this regional vision based on all that metrics and turning it into projects that people can see down the street and really begin to build out a system over time. A couple of spin-off efforts that's come from this Insight 2050 Link Us. There's been a big focus on transit-oriented development. You know, we're not New York. I think we look a lot like Raleigh in some ways. We didn't build development around transit because we didn't have it. As we're adding it, we looked at, well, what if we could add development along those areas to really get in front of some of those population numbers, the need for housing and more. So there's an associated effort looking at all of the different mechanisms to do this. And where this vision turned into reality just happened over the summer, where the city of Columbus, for the first time in 70 years, overhauled their zoning on all of these corridors so that they can help focus that growth there, because they know it'll save the money, it'll address the housing needs. And this is happening here. It's real, and it came from a lot of collaboration across the region. I'll finish with this. The Insight 2050 effort has informed us on what we call the big moves. These are other regional transportation things that are going on. When people can name what growth is happening and understanding the choices, it's been really positive to get them in front of it. It spun off into a regional housing strategy where we've brought communities from across the region together, looking at ways that each community could understand their impact on the regional housing situation, which is intense here like it is in many places. And then the last thing I'll say about this effort is it also led to an effort to make sure that we were keeping our ear to the ground. And we launched 2 years ago, as part of this, an annual survey with our major media partner, which here is the Columbus Dispatch. And we do a 15 county survey of thousands of people with a surveying firm to ask them questions about how they're feeling on growth, on these initiatives, housing, transportation, so that as our local governments are depending on the hard data on fiscal impact and environmental and transportation, we also are making sure we're paying attention to what folks really are feeling and making sure we're staying tuned to those needs. So I know that's a lot of information in 15 minutes. I thought I could do it all in 15 minutes, Lee, but now that I saw the New York video, they did it in 3. So I'm going to have to work on, on polishing this a little bit, but happy to take questions. But this has been an effort that I'll say it's been really interesting to help our communities see their place in the region and see the options and how those options could lead to real impacts, not just real impacts, but real projects to get in front of it. So thanks for letting me speak about this, and I'll finish with this. We still want to grow better as we get bigger. Thanks.
Thank you, William. Great job. Andrew, why don't you go ahead, and then we'll have time at the end for any board members that may want to ask y'all some questions.
Well, that sounds great. I'm happy to do that, and I will echo what William said. I'm so happy to be able to join you today, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and my friend and colleague Lee and William. I think it's really terrific for us to be able to share information with each other and learn from one another. And so we're happy to do this for Lee and you all, and we would look for you all to return the favor to us if we ask it of you. Please share with us things that we can take away from your area. William did a lot of description about the process used to develop a regional vision. I'm going to skip a little bit of that process because we use very similar processes over time. And I'm going to go more towards what does the vision look like now? Okay. And as a starting point, I don't know how many of you have been out to Utah, but you can see on your screen right here, give me a thumbs up that you can see the screen there. You see the state of Utah. And if you know anything about Utah, you know that we've got the mountains for the best skiing in the world. We've got the national parks. And so you think of Utah as this great natural environment, sparsely populated. But the reality of it is that of Utah's 3.5 million people, 82% of them live in this area, our region, the Wasatch Front region. And so I'll zoom into that. And it is this area of the Wasatch Front that is the location for our regional vision. And that vision we call the Wasatch Choice Vision. Now, before I describe to you anything about the vision, let me just give you a little bit of a sense of what its value is as we see it. And I say this not now in terms of the benefits to mobility or economic vitality. Those benefits do exist. But from the perspective of a regional organization like yours, having a vision like this enables and facilitates a regional conversation, because we all know that that's the way life functions, right? The people that live in one of your communities, they go across the boundaries to other cities and to other counties for work, for school, for shopping. Mobility is regional, transportation is regional, the job market and the economy are regional, environmental issues. This is the way the world and life functions. And so having us be able to coordinate and collaborate together is really essential, because we can't put walls up, literally or figuratively, between our communities for us to thrive, because that's just not the way that the world works. I would also say, for those of you that are elected officials, which I imagine is most of you, probably for you, just like in our region, your residents get concerned about change, right? If there's new development that's coming, they say, sometimes literally and sometimes figuratively, not in my backyard. And they are worried and they are concerned about change. And here in Utah, we are growing and we are changing really, really fast. In fact, in the past decade, we were the fastest growing state in the nation. And so what your conceptions of what Utah is or was are probably different. I'm part of that growth and change. I grew up in New York City. I lived and worked in Chicago and Illinois, and then I moved out here in 2010. So our region is changing so fast. And part of the value that comes from the regional vision is that we believe that it gives the public confidence that we are working together, that their elected officials are thinking about and planning and coordinating for the future, because people don't just think about themselves, right? They think about, and you all think about, what about our children and our grandchildren? We're doing our work for future generations. So it helps give confidence to the public that we're working together. And then it also just helps to inform and coordinate and align our decision-making. And I want to echo something that William said, which is really, really important. This is a voluntary effort in our region. This vision, and I'm going to go into it in a little more detail with you in a moment, it is not like super ordinances or land use for the region. This does not function as a mandate on any local community. In fact, we take the input that comes from the elected officials, from the community organizations, from the business organizations, and we take that ground up and we integrate it into a broader regional vision. But we don't have land use authority. We don't want to have land use authority. That is the province of the local governments. And so there's really no supplanting of local control. And also, critically, this is not one size fits all. There are common strategies, but what works in Salt Lake City, which is the metropolitan heart of our region, is very different than what may work in a smaller, more suburban community. So each community really has to decide what are its priorities. What are your priorities for your areas based on your culture and your community as it's growing and changing? What the regional vision helps do is to look at those individual community preferences within a broader framework of the region and look at the cross-cutting of a whole variety of issues: infrastructure, transportation, water, economic development, housing, parks and public spaces, all of these things together. And it also helps to look far into the future. So, when most of you are presumably in 4-year terms, and you are therefore necessarily focused on what's happening now. And that's the way people live their lives for the most part as well. What's going on in my day-to-day life? Having a regional vision with a good story in the way that William described helps people come up from today and think about where do we want to be in the future for generations to come. So with that sort of general overview, let me actually take you through this Wasatch Joyce vision a little bit. Again, this is the region that I was describing where the majority of our residents live. The mountains are on the east, the Great Salt Lake and Utah Lake are on the west. And I'm just going to zoom into the area that surrounds Salt Lake City. Some of you have probably been here before, and if you haven't been, we certainly welcome you visiting a fact-finding mission or maybe vacation. And what you see in this vision, it embodies 4 key strategies that we have arrived at. And those strategies are transportation choices, giving people real choices for how they get around by driving, by transit, by biking, and by walking. And you see the lines on the map. The red lines are are roadway. The blue lines are major transit, commuter rail and light rail and bus rapid transit. And then the green lines on here are actually major trail systems, so people can ride and walk as a means of transportation as well. The second key strategy is housing options, providing and supporting housing types and locations that meet the needs of all residents. Differing housing types, and in our urban centers, that can be more apartment, townhome, condo, mixed use and multifamily development. Whereas in the more suburban areas, you're going to find more single family detached residential. So different types of neighborhoods and different housing options that work for people. Strategy number 3 is parks and public spaces to ensure ample and convenient parks, public spaces, and open land for gathering and recreating. And even though we have the mountains right in our backyard, almost literally, we know that we need to have parks and trails woven right into the fabric of our community. So it's in people's neighborhoods, because that's so important to quality of life. And then finally, and what sort of brings it all together, is city and town centers, we call them. So that's creating and enhancing these city and town centers as the hearts of our communities. Walkable areas where activity is focused, with places to live, work, and play. And what you can see on the map is that these colored areas are those city and town centers where the local communities have said, these are areas we want to focus development and have a mix of uses. And so the most intense center is downtown Salt Lake. But then in other areas of our region, the intensity of the centers varies. So it can go from a city center to just a neighborhood or even a town center that works for the scale of that community. And what I want you to notice here is the coordination between the regional transportation system and those centers of development. Because really, this is part of the magic that comes, I think, from having a regional vision, is coordinating land use and development with transportation. Because if we can give people the ability to live, if they want more people to live and work in close proximity, say, to a high capacity transit line, then that means that they're going to get access to more opportunities for jobs using that transit system around the region. Now, that doesn't mean that's what everybody wants to do, but if we can give more people that opportunity for that centered kind of downtown living where they can use transit or bike or walk if they want to, we're responding to the market and we're giving people more access to opportunities. And then, by the way, they can also choose to not have as many cars or maybe not even have a car at all. They use transit. It helps with our traffic congestion. So even if you don't use transit, people using it benefits you while you're driving because that's one less car in the freeway that you're not competing with. It helps with our air quality. And so this network of centers and transportation and open spaces around the region are at the heart of the structure that we have for our vision. And Lee, just to make this point really clear, and then I will stop and turn it back to you or to you, Mr. Chair. You can see how these items come together. Centers of development, as I described, that the local governments have the lead role in. Other land uses, industrial, airport, et cetera. Parks and public spaces woven through the fabric of our communities. Trailways, our transit system, and our roadway system, all planned together now and then out into the future. So with that, I think I will stop sharing. And Mr. Chair and Lee, I'm sure William and I would be very happy to fill in any details here or attempt to answer any questions. And I'll just say one more thing, and that is, William and I, we don't have our boards with us right now. Okay, so you can ask us the tough questions that Lee, he might be careful in answering, but we'll give you the real answers. I'm just kidding. Lee's terrific, but we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. We've got some time. I'd love board members, if you have questions for William and Andrew about anything, feel free.
Hey, William, Andrew, Byron McAllister, town of Selma, North Carolina. What type of pushback did you get from local governments in the beginning of these processes?
Well, I think it's a great question on pushback. I think it may sound overly simple, but our local governments were worried first that was this going to be a plan that they all had to adopt, that we were going to do the planning for them. And it took a little while to have those conversations. We did them one-on-one. We did it in small groups about, hey, this was about informing where we are as a region and giving those local governments the tools. So that initial pushback was really based on that strong local government authority that we depend on, which is don't tell us how to plan. This was more on a let's give you tools to do it. So I think that was probably our biggest pushback. Andrew, I don't know if that's consistent.
Yeah, we've had a similar dynamic with local governments having a degree of concern that by participating in this regional planning process that they are sort of turning over their control or their discretion. We work really hard to make it clear that that is not how this works. Our boards, just like yours, are made up of principally local elected officials. So this is your plan. I will say that a dynamic that's at play in our state, I don't know if this is true in yours, is the relationship with the legislature as well. And I will tell you candidly that to some extent our legislature has wanted to impose on local governments mandates for how development is to occur. And we have found that the regional vision acts as a really nice buffer, might be a way to describe it, or tie between statewide interests and local interests. Because by having this regional vision, we can demonstrate to the state leadership that we are working together. We do have a plan to tackle the challenges. And then also to some extent, candidly, we can insulate local governments from state mandates being imposed on them because we can demonstrate that value and coordination that's happening at a regional level.
Thank you.
There's a question online, I believe.
Ms. Garcia.
Ms. Garcia?
Hi. Yes, Katie Garcia for Town of Micro. So prior to my living in Micro, I lived in Chicago, and so I can certainly vouch for the beauty of public transportation and everything that it can offer someone working. One thing I certainly experienced living in Chicago was that the things that are closest to those sort of train stops and bus routes are places like theaters and museums and amphitheaters. And I was curious how much of your planning accounts for the growth of that sort of structure. Right now, I know the city of Raleigh is having to move Red Hat Amphitheater to better accommodate its neighbors. And I just was curious how far ahead you look for things of growth of that nature.
Yeah, I'll take a first cut at that, William. It's a great question because I would say the more broadly you can cast your view, your net, in terms of key regional destinations and integrate the consideration of that with transportation, housing, job location, et cetera, the better. And of course, if you have key destinations, be they cultural, educational, retail, whatever they may be, then coordinating them with your transportation system can be really effective. There's a bit of a chicken and egg issue at play here, right? So do you locate a facility and then or a new business development and then say to your transportation folks, hey, we need to serve this, hurry up? Or do you try to locate those regional destinations on areas that are already well served by transportation? And I think, perhaps the best answer is to be doing the planning for these things at the same time to the extent that you can.
Yeah, I think that's consistent in our area. Not having what we'll call real mass transit in Columbus, this effort has allowed us to see the benefits, adjust the zoning, but also we've been paying close attention to not just the cultural amenities, which drive a lot of traffic on transit, but also on the major job centers. So our plan, we're overlaying it on what's already there to try to make it make sense. But going forward, I think that's going to be a big discussion is where additional amenities or cultural institutions are located.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Shannon Baxter from a teeny tiny town called Zebulon, but I once lived in what is now kind of big town of Columbus, Ohio. So go Bucks. My questions I have are two parts. As you demonstrated in your presentation, William, oftentimes when we anticipate growth, it doesn't happen the way we think it's going to happen. And whether that shift is large or just small, depending on what happens regionally, sometimes those things, of course, take us off guard. When you have created your plans, how much ability to pivot or flexibility have you built into the overall structure of what you've created to forecast into the future?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and we'll always welcome you back in Columbus, just in case. I think for us, the timeline there were two big things that caused us to pivot. One was, like a lot of areas, we were right in the middle of our second phase and the pandemic hit. And so there were all of these questions on, would transit still be relevant? What's going to happen with growth? How did these things change? So there was a lot of learning during that period, to be frank. But we were able to access our partners in new ways to pull in, the latest research, to look at our numbers and make sure that things were still connected. The other thing for us is we had a series of really major economic development projects that were announced in 2022. I mean, massive region-changing $100 billion investments. And very quickly we had to pivot because the question soon became, oh my gosh, we've been planning for growth, but is it going to double? Is it going to triple? What is that really going to look like? And for us, what we wanted to do was check the numbers, look at other regions, and make sure that we could pivot and update the information. And the good news part of that is because we've been planning for growth, we didn't know where that growth necessarily was going to come from or what company, but we'd already built in pretty sufficient numbers. And that was really, it calmed a lot of our local governments down because they're like, oh, this is what you've been talking about for the last 10 years. We just didn't know the names of the companies yet. So, but we still had to pivot, and it did bump some of our future forecasts up. So we had to do some retooling, but hopefully that gets at your question. Sometimes these major events can cause you to have to pivot and reach out to your partners and your elected officials.
I'll just add to that briefly. President Eisenhower famously talked about planning and plans, and I won't get the quote exactly right, but basically said that the value of planning, the exercise of planning, is everything. And another great statesman, and his point was, it's not so much the fixed plan itself, but the exercise of planning. And then this other great statesman, Mike Tyson, said something to the effect of, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. And I say that somewhat tongue in cheek, but the point is that when you do this regional planning work, it is dynamic. And it is not just that you develop a plan and then you are done, and then you implement that plan. The nature of our environment and our economy, look at the pandemic, as William said, all the examples that he illustrated, show us that this effort, it's like a muscle that we use, a practice, a collaborative approach that we use, that is a continual effort, and it helps us be responsive and make the best decisions for our regions if we do this planning work continually in a dynamic environment.
Yeah, and then the second question that I had was, as far as making sure that you're checking in with the different regional partners that you have throughout the entire, continuing process of bringing your plan to fruition, how often do you check in with those stakeholders, or is it a continual process? Do you engage in public input at like 3, 5, 10 years, or is this something that you're just continually hoping people will give you positive or negative, or just feedback in general along the way?
That's a great question, and my answer to that is that it depends on which audience and stakeholders you're talking about. So at one end of that spectrum is a broad outreach to the entire community, right? Where you're trying to get thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to weigh in and provide input. We have a sort of a rough pattern of doing that every 4-ish years, which coincides with the development of the official transportation plans. At the other end of that spectrum are the key stakeholders, the members of regional councils like Central Pines, the key transportation agencies, the business industry associations, with whom we are in really constant contact. I mean, when I say that, I mean literally every week we are engaged. And then there are different audiences, maybe your fellow elected officials who are not so involved necessarily in the regional work. Maybe they're a city council member or whatever the case may be, that they're not, participating actively in Central Pines. Well, maybe they're checked in with on a quarterly or an annual basis. So it's sort of, it runs a spectrum depending on who the audience is. William, do you do something comparable?
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, thanks for that. No, it's every 4 years is a big push for us. And we build it into our regular technical assistance. So when our planners are working with communities on all the various different things we do, we're using that as a touch point with the folks in all of our local governments to keep them plugged into the plan. But it's a challenge on a couple of levels. We have our board of elected officials. With the pandemic, we've seen a lot of change. So there's been a lot of outreach to make them familiar with it. Just because the community's been a member for 20 years doesn't mean that the elected officials were the same ones. So there's a lot of continued feedback. And then the last thing I'll say is, and I mentioned in my presentation, we were really concerned about ongoing feedback from the public. And so that partnership with our major media partner to do that annual survey has been really helpful, because a lot of our local officials, they get it, they understand it, seen the data, but then they pause and they say, yeah, but what do people really think? Do they really want this? And so we've been able to, in a different way, be able to say, well, yeah, actually they do, or you know what, looks like we have to go a different direction. And so having that extra outreach to just residents has been really helpful.
Thank you so much, gentlemen.
All right, we had some hands raised in the room, but before we do that, there was an online question. I want to make sure that they feel included. Ms. Carter?
Yep.
Or we can read it maybe, if need be.
So Commissioner Carter, if
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you can read it, or, I'm just curious about whether or not part of your regional planning includes planning for adequate public schools facilities to be sure there's space for all the children that are moving to your region, or if that is just something that happens, within cities, counties, more specifically.
Yeah, it's a great question, and actually always a big stress point for communities. So for us, we're an association of local governments, all sorts of districts except school districts.
Yeah.
And so we get asked this one a lot. Well, what about the school districts? So on the positive, they've been able to use these projections, these tools in their own planning for facilities and student growth, not to the level that I think they would want or that we would want. We just haven't had the resources to help them do it. The other reason it's a stress point, and I don't know if it's this way in the Carolinas or in Utah, but in Ohio, school districts don't follow municipal boundaries. So you have municipalities planning for land use, housing, economic development, and schools representing different geographies. So it gets really complicated. Long story short, that's not been something we've gone in, but it is something that I know they've been using our information on demographics.
I agree with that, and candidly, I think it's an insightful question, and if I think this is an area that we could do better in. In school demand, and also then the siting and location of schools, which has a huge impact on the neighborhoods and transportation, et cetera, and safety, of course. So we could do better in that area.
Yeah, this is a great question, and this is a we could do better area, because one of the things that our research and our data has been showing is that housing types don't generate the same level of children as they used to. But that's something that we haven't had the full suite of tools to show local government or local school districts that, yeah, you may add 1,000 housing units, but it's not going to generate 5,000 kids like it did 20 years ago. It might generate 500. So we haven't been able to help them with that like we could. So future efforts, if you're doing it, may be something to consider.
All right, I saw two more hands in the room, but that might be it. So I saw you, Mr. Rao first, and then Mr. Kerr in second. So go ahead.
Okay. Steve Rao, a council member of the town of Morrisville, and Ohio was Columbus was a second home to me. I was a nationally ranked tennis player and used to go there almost every weekend to play tournaments. And the two best players in the country were Ty Tucker and David Cass. And Ty Tucker now lives in Columbus. He's Ohio State's coach, and David Cass has a tennis academy. So,
oh, that's cool.
Great city. But my question has to do with a few months ago, I hosted in partnership with Central Pine, John Chambers here for a summit on AI. And it was really fascinating. For those of you who don't know, he ran Cisco and now is a big investor. And he was talking about how important having an AI and digital strategy is for just nations and governments. And he talked a lot about predictive analytics and things that we can do to kind of use AI in a positive way so that we can better predict trends in the environment, infrastructure, economics, things like that. So I just was curious as to the kinds of things that you all are thinking about in Ohio about leveraging the rapid innovation in these areas, of course, addressing the challenges. So I just was curious because he said India is doing a really great job of that. And that in the last 7 years, they've leveraged their complete economic strategy on digitization. And they've gone from one of the worst economies in the world to number 3, and he predicts number 1 in the next 5 years. So I just was curious about that.
I mean, Andrew, I'll jump in. We haven't done enough, and this is an emerging area, but we do have so we've got a transportation top committee, an environmental top committee, and one of our top committees is called our regional data committee. And that group of local government officials engaged in data and all that goes along with that, with technology, they've actually just embarked upon a subgroup to really look at that question. And I think there's some exciting things that could play into scenario planning or future forecasting. We haven't got there yet, but we're thinking about it. So it's a great motivation for us to keep going.
I would generally agree with that. We're using AI to some extent in our analytics, in our modeling as it stands right now to help us make sure that we're analyzing data in the most effective way. Also, it's in our work of trying to anticipate the future, which is part of the nature of a regional vision, right? It's anticipating the future, including where people will live and where they will work and how they will move around. And AI has the potential to be the ultimate disruptor. So it's not just about using AI, it's about trying to predict. We can use the AI to try to predict the disruptive impact that AI will have on our built environment and the way people work, and add advanced air mobility, drone mobility. So where the pace of change is accelerating. So I don't think any of us have a really good answer to that question, but we need to be all working at it as much as we can to use it and anticipate the impacts as much as possible.
All right, last question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Ronnie Kern, I got a basic question. I think you touched on it with Shannon's question or something about the business, the private sector. And I guess my question is, how do you get them to collaborate? How do you get them buy-in? I know we talked about pushback from the government people, and you definitely don't want the business people to push back because you need their capital, private capital, to do some of the visions you do. So how do you keep them engaged from the plan, from the origination, also through it? I know, Andrew, you've got a big fish out there, Darrell Hanson. How do you get people like him to buy into your plan where he can take your money to the town he lives in rather than take it to somewhere else? How do you guys get the people that's really going to invest the capital to buy in your plan?
Yeah, I'll give you just a few thoughts on that. First of all, private landowners and private sector organizations, businesses, they're making their own decisions about how and where to invest their capital. And so we're not trying to dictate to that on that. One of the ways that we come at this, I'll give you a planning answer and then sort of a collaboration answer. The planning answer is that one of the values of having a regional plan that works in terms of transportation and local land use and utilities and water, et cetera, is that it can create certainty for investors. And so oftentimes we will work and coordinate with our site selector organizations that will use our information about predictions and plans for the future to share with investors, be they looking to reinvest in an existing area or a new investment. And then we will use tools to show them with the projected growth in a particular location in the transportation system, a business located in X spot will be able to access within a certain amount of time with various modes of transportation, X number of potential customers, X number of potential employees. These are the connections to the airport, et cetera, et cetera. So having a predictable plan helps business leaders make decisions that are informed about their future investments. Then, in terms of process and collaboration, there's just an old-fashioned answer, which is we just work with them. We engage them in our work, in our committees. We participate. I'll be spending most of tomorrow morning working with our Salt Lake Chamber as we're looking ahead and planning for the 2034 Winter Olympics, which are coming to Salt Lake. So just a real intentionality about coordinating between public and private sector. I don't think there's any substitute for that.
Yeah, I'd say that that's a great question. And it sounds like you may already be doing some of this, but that's been a core principle for us, is making sure that our local governments had that connection to the business community and the major institutions in town. Our Insight 2050 effort, it was launched intentionally as a public-private effort. Yes, we did a lot of the things that regional councils do, but we wanted to make sure that they were there the whole time. And I think to Andrew's point, our business leaders actually wanted, this sounds kind of silly, but they wanted all our local governments to use the same objective data. Give them that certainty that one local government wasn't going one direction and the other a different direction based on different facts. They also wanted to make sure that we were incorporating things that we hadn't before, things like market research or different data sources that major businesses were incorporating. So having them at the table really opened our eyes, because a lot of traditional city planning efforts didn't bring in those private sources. Two words of caution, though, when working with the private sector, and I say this lovingly because they're great partners, is one is be really careful with developers. They were part of the process, but they weren't the lead folks, because we were worried about this being viewed as a developer pushed effort around growth. Our major employers were all at the table, our major institutions, but we were really intentional about giving them a space, but not at the head of the table. And the last thing was we've learned that we've had to be really careful with boosterism. Some of our business leaders really like growth, good for the bottom line. And all of a sudden, that billion person number became 2 million people or 3 million people, and going back to them constantly saying, all right, let's ground everybody in the same set of forecasts. So hopefully that's helpful.
William and Andrew, thank you so much for your insights into your experiences in Utah and Ohio. I think this will be very valuable as we embark upon our own efforts along these lines.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Really happy to participate. Anything for Lee.
Anything for Lee. Good luck, all.
Good luck. Thanks.
Okay, so we're turning over to Lee for some the end here.
So I hope this was valuable for you. This is sort of what we've envisioned with the newly designed board meetings, that you can really dig into a topic for a little while. I'm not too worried about time. I think we're still good. But I just wanted to wrap up a couple things around this idea of a regional vision. So the computer's going to cooperate with me. So why now? We're connected, right, as a region. I get complete credit for these animations. So just if Beth had done it, it'd been a lot more pretty. It'd have been, I do this. So that's why it's a little crude, but it works, right? So each little car is 5,000 one-way commutes. And so we have a lot of folks going back and forth across the region for work, despite the pandemic. And it's, yes, of course, a lot of it's happening in Wake, Durham, and Orange, but, Harnett to Wake or Harnett to Cumberland, there's a good number of folks that are moving all across the region. So we are very connected. And again, this is just the top 10. And I apologize, the slide's a little hard to see, although it's a little easier now that it's dark outside. But I also want to be realistic. We've got a lot of great things going for us, but we have a lot of challenges as well, right? And I think talking regionally about things like poverty is really important. And I'm getting up because I want to point out, and I think how we look at data is really important as well. And so if we were to look at a certain set of data and said, how's poverty? And we look at the Raleigh-Cary MSA, poverty obviously is an issue there, but compared to other MSAs, it looks like, we're in really good position. But then remember, we have 2 MSAs. And so a lot of our data is bifurcated, okay? If you look at poverty in Durham, same graph, same sort of source of information, the number is way over on the other side, right? So what does it really look like for the region? the part of the regional planning effort is to realize that we got a lot of great things going for us, but we have some challenges. And what do they really look like regionally within the 10-county region? And talking about the data, this will help us get a better sense of what's going on in the region and individually in each of the communities that you all work and play and live in. And I really feel strongly about this. Our region succeeded because of leaders that came before us that took risks and they collaborated, and by golly, it paid off. And I'm really proud that this organization was a centerpiece in a lot of that. And I think we can continue to be that. You know, I pointed to the plan over there as a centerpiece. And I think we owe it to the folks that came before us and to, you know, don't get too, you know, but we owe it to our kids and grandkids too, right? So it's time for us to pay it forward to those that came before us. So again, I want to reemphasize that as we think about this plan, I really want to stress what it's not. It's not to prescribe specific plans on local decision makers. I think William and Andrew talked about that really well. It's not another layer of bureaucracy for the local government. It's not to detract or lessen what's working well, or substitute, duplicate the other necessary required plans that are important at the local or regional level. Rather, I think the plan's an opportunity for the entire region to come together and think about what the region may look like by 2050. It's an organized way to think about what's working well, find opportunities to emphasize those things and to apply it to maybe other parts of the region. It's also a venue to discuss how to create more effective regional voice around challenges to increase opportunities at the state and federal level. Andrew, I think, talked about that. I think having a regional plan helps the region talk about what's affecting us at the General Assembly, on the steps of Capitol Hill, wherever else, in the force of nearly 4 million residents in a single plan will say a lot more than all of us trying to do it on our own. And again, and the last thing, and I've heard this from leaders across the region, that as we welcome and they welcome newly elected officials, there's not a single document to ground people in about what is going on in the region, right? And so as a newly elected official, you're trying to figure out what you want to do, what your priorities are, and there's nothing there to ground. And it's not saying a new set of elected officials can certainly change the plan, right? But a starting point that everybody can look to and say, oh, okay, this is sort of the foundation, and where do I build from here? We have nothing to give to elected officials on regional day, right? Or anything like that on where we are as a region and where we're going. So to be successful, we really want all of you engaged. And there is a financial component to it as well. We think it's going to probably be at least a $1.5 million endeavor for the organization. We're trying to do it in a way that, you know, we're not going to try to blow the budget with things that aren't necessary, trying to do some of it in-house. But this is not something we're going to be able to give to you in 6 months, right? It is going to be concerted, long-range effort. We also want to do it in a way that we are able to sustain it, so that when me and you all aren't sitting here, that they're still talking about Connected Region 2055 or 2060, right? And we're continuing that discussion. But the good news is we've already had some commitments. Some of those are in the private sector, Mayor Curran, on helping with this planning effort. So just as an example, and I haven't been talking to a lot of people yet, but I found that some folks have been really excited about it. Capital Broadcasting Company, I've had a specific meeting with Jimmy Goodman. They have committed $300,000 in in-kind work on a lot of stuff that we would have had to do ourselves. and very committed to being part of this effort. He knows his dad was a big part of a lot of these plans here. Jim, good. Research Triangle Park Foundation has already budgeted for $15,000 this fiscal year and plans to probably commit more money in subsequent years. The Regional Transportation Alliance has tentatively committed $20,000. And the Triangle Community Coalition asked me to come talk to their group about it, and they're very excited about it. They want to be involved, but they said, hey, we want to sort of see where the local governments, almost like a match, right? We'll put in if they put in. So, but I think they're interested in participating as well. I agree, but also take their money. So part of what we want to do, Capital Broadcasting has worked with us on a survey that we're pushing out to the entire region to help get more information. So if you want to scan that and take the survey tonight, we're also getting it out to your local governments. We really want to get as broad of a response that will help continue to inform us as we think about next steps. So I know we're a little tight on time. We've got some other agenda items, but this is not the first time we're going to be talking about this, right? So, I can answer maybe a question or two, but then, we can get to business and then we can talk for months to come about this project.
Yeah, real quick question. One's probably simple. Is there possible federal grants to make up for that 1.5 million? So, maybe a grant can help us reach that goal. The second question has more to do with what will be in the plan, because I think personally one of the greatest risks we have, we're going to double the population by 2050. One of the greatest risks we have is clean water.
Yes.
And I really think everything about water and sewer is segmented. It's probably one of the worst, in my opinion, one of the worst segmented things that we have in the planning process. Transportation is usually connected. A lot of stuff is really connected, but our water and sewer issues are not connected. And I really think, I hate to think by 2020, if we have another million people, that half of them is going to be on well and septic in 2050. That would be very disappointing and very much not planning very well. So I think that's a key piece, and I don't know if it's included or not.
Yes, a quick, yes, we're looking for every funding source we can get. We've already talked to the federal delegation about this as an idea. They're very interested, interested helping us to look for money. We've contemplated a few opportunities for federal grants, but with the grants sometimes come some strings that are attached. So we want flexibility to be able to move the plan where we need it. And if we can find sources that allow flexibility, absolutely, we'll be interested in it. I agree on the water sewer thing. That is a primary component of what we're thinking about as we're developing a scope of work. And we're actually thinking about the scenario planning process like Mid-Ohio did. And as part of the scenario planning, one of the components would be helping to price out different scenarios on water and sewer and multiple other areas. So water sewer infrastructure in general will be a major component. Yes, sir.
All right. Let's move on then. Thank you so much, everybody. Now on to the business. First item is the fee schedule for office space after hours. For Lee.
All right, I will take you, Elena, sharing again. So the good news, we've had this space open since December. The space across the hallways is September. We're getting a lot of great use of the space, and we're seeing more and more requests for use after business hours and on the weekends. And so we certainly want to be able to accommodate that. But we also want to be able to recover our costs when we do that. And the primary costs are to have a staff member here to be able to have the space open and to, address any issues. And when we have functions on the weekend or after hours, we're charged by our landlord because they have to keep the air conditioning and the heat on and all that. So this resolution would, and any fees have to be approved by the governing board. I'm not allowed to charge without the authority of the board. So we're asking for a temporary fee schedule to be put in place by this resolution so that we can charge appropriately until we develop the budget for next fiscal year. By that time, we'll have a lot more data on the request, and we'll be able to present a more comprehensive and full fee schedule for you all at that time. So that is the item, and if you all are okay with that, it will be on consent agenda for your approval.
I just have one question, because we do have the North Carolina Women in Municipal Government. We have already agreed. We're good. Okay, because I was like, oh,
There are a couple of it'll be up to my authority if there are. We're good.
Okay,
but
cool.
there are things going forward that we need to make sure we cover our costs.
Understood. I
Yep.
just wanted to make sure. So
Any
I had
commitments
plan B.
made to this point, we'll continue that.
Thank you.
All right, without objection, we'll put that on the consent agenda. Next item is 100% membership drive proposal. This has both Lee and my name on it. What I was thinking about the positive impact I could have as the chair, one of the things was to try to keep this drive going, that we could try to get 100% of our local governments as members of this organization. I think there's a symbolicness to having everybody involved. You can talk about when you're writing grants. You can talk about when you're maybe doing the regional planning, that 100% of the governments are included as part of members. So I think Lee shares this desire and has come up with some proposal that we're trying to incentivize and encourage the laggards, or the people who are hesitant, I guess, to say. There are only a few of them, but the ones who are hesitant, try to get them on board. So, Lee?
Well said. I really appreciated the chair making this a priority and asking for my thoughts on it. We have 4 local, so we've added 10 local governments in the last 7 years. We were at 37, now we're at 47. We have 4 left, 4 Oaks in Johnston County, and Pine Bluff, Foxfire, and Taylortown in Moore County. Foxfire and 4 Oaks have been members before. I do not believe Taylortown or Pine Bluff ever have been members of the regional council. What we're asking, and the financial impact is null because we didn't plan for their dues, and it's a pretty negligible amount. We would ask your permission to offer them no-cost dues through June 30th, saying that the board really desires for them to be part of the organization, and we'd extend this one-time offer to them. We would work with them on providing a service. After talking to the officers, maybe it's grant writing, but maybe that isn't the best fit for them, and maybe there's something else that they'd like. So we would sort of work through that with the local governments, with the hope that after June 30th, they'd just continue to be members, and we'd be at 100%. So that is the proposal.
So this is what Senator Bergen requested of us at our legislative day.
Yes, ma'am.
Specifically, he pulled me aside to relay to this, or that.
Yep.
And he said bluntly, bring them in free, because you'll be the only organization doing what y'all are doing, have 100% representation. So I wanted to share that it's great for our region, but you know, as we work with the legislature for some of our bigger goals, you know, we've already gotten feedback from leadership on what they want to see to help us, help them, help us.
Mr. Gant brought that idea. I was like, well, you know, it's not the first time I've heard this. And I talked about what you had said. So, yes.
One of the things I noticed, one of the towns is very, very small. And probably some of these little small towns in some of the counties just not growing. They just don't have $1 to give. And I'm wondering how many towns got smaller than 1,000 that's still there? And can we do something for a very small town like 664 people? I mean, $292. I mean, we could raise that tonight and pay the annual fee. So how can we, make that number a whole number without,
Yeah.
them feeling like they can't afford it,
Well, and I don't want to belay Taylortown, may think they're a member. We've actually helped them on a few things and they asked for the resolutions to become members. And we followed up, we never got it back. And so there's part of me that thinks if we approach them, they may say, well, we thought we were already members. But to your question, if it's okay, let me give that some thought and maybe we can come back with some analysis around that. The only thing I'll say is that sometimes some of our smaller local governments are the ones that need a lot of technical assistance. So how do we balance the time and the cost, right, versus, and again, you're right, it's a negligible amount, but are there other funding sources? How can we provide those services? Love the question. If it's okay, let me give it some thought and come back with some strategies around that.
I only
some
thought we got a
options.
large region.
Yes, sir.
And there's a lot of haves and have-nots in our region. And most of us sitting in here are haves. And how can we help ones that have not? And some of these real small towns, less than 1,000 people.
It's part of the role of the regional council. I mean, I've talked about micro several times, right? And how proud we are and what a joy it's been to work with Ms. Garcia and the folks in micro. It's a good example and a great board to work with. So. Garcia has her hand up. So.
I was going to say, Lee, speaking as the smallest town in Johnston County, if you need like a ambassador to help encourage these towns to join, I know you guys have served micro in ways that we couldn't have even anticipated when we first were introduced to the council. Our biggest problem was our audits and how behind we were. But even things like offering us a fellow for a term really helped us a lot get on track as a small town and get into the 21st century. So I'm happy to help with that in any way you might see fit.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, I think with this proposal, if this passes tonight, I was planning on going to some meetings possibly, trying to convince them, Lee's pretty good looking, so maybe he can show up at some of the meetings too and be persuasive. But if you guys know these, if you guys know these folks and people in these communities on these boards, I think we can take all the help we can get to spread the word, encourage, and all that. So, and it's only 4 left. I think it's manageable for a year. If we could just get these 4 on, I think it can be done. So yeah, thank you for your help, Ms. Garcia, and anyone else who knows or has a connection. I think that would be appreciated. Okay, ready to move on?
Yeah, that'll be. It takes board approval to waive the fees, so that'll be on your consent agenda as well.
Without approval or without objection, we'll add that to the consent. Okay. Next is the Board of Delegates and Executive Committee meeting schedule for 2025.
Beth should just said, turn the page. All right. I was looking for the schedule. It was in the packet. So we're required to bring the proposed meeting schedule for the board and the executive committee to you by October. So your schedule here is proposed for next year. It takes a vote of the board to approve that. So basically this mirrors what you've done this year. A lesser number of board of delegate meetings, a higher number of executive committee meetings, beginning the year with sort of a year opening celebration, ending the year with a informal meeting in December, more float in to celebrate the year and recognize outgoing delegates and our length of service award recognitions for staff members. So, and we looked at any conflicts with League of Municipalities, City Vision, anything like that. We think we're clear of any of those.
think the only thing there might have been a question about was the May meeting. Was that the week of Memorial Day?
It's the week of Memorial Day, but we could probably be flexible on that. We've got to work through budget adoption.
Yeah, and that April 23rd is City Vision.
It is. I thought it wasn't. Okay.
I thought we avoided that.
I thought we were clear.
I'll double check again, but
Okay.
We did consciously try to
We
limit
did. We
that.
specifically told
We
you.
talked about it.
no, that's true. Okay, I stand corrected because they moved it, so it's April 29th.
Okay.
I was like going.
I was like, I know we looked at that.
Foiled again.
All right, any questions? No objection on that, the consent. The last two are for Doug Lachitsky for sole source approval for a couple of softwares. I'll hand it over to you, Doug.
Great, thanks. I'll just stand here and try to project. A couple times, annually, we renew our software subscriptions, and this year we have two packages that we have purchased last year, and we would like to renew again this year. They're unique software packages. There aren't quite other machinations that do the same modeling and same data outputs that these two do. One of them is Streetlight, and Streetlight essentially takes big data that it skims off of things like sources like our cell phones, our subscriptions, anything that tracks us, our vehicles, and it buys data from third parties and repackages into a format that we can use. We use this data to check our travel demand models and to try to understand what the traffic projection should be. It does have some limitations when it comes to pedestrian and non-motorized travel, but they work around and try to compensate for those shortcomings. So it is a very valuable tool that we use for our regional travel demand model to predict how people are moving and where they are. The other resource is a software package called Remix. It is a software package that we use primarily to model public transportation routes and different alternatives for how those changes to those routes and services affect things like cost and travel time reliability for the constituents that use public transportation. Those are primarily what we are asking for you to provide a sole source exemption for tonight. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
And I'll just say, so the role of the board around this, the DCHC policy board is charged with obviously making the decisions on their work plan and what DCHC does. The role of the board of delegates is really more around the procurement and whether the procurement is being done correctly, since we're their administrative agency. So our procurement policy is for any purchases, sole source purchases above 30,000. I don't have the authority to sign off. That falls to the board. So his board had the conversation about the usefulness, right, and the validity. Your role here tonight is really more around the legality of the purchase in our role. But obviously, if you have any questions, I know Doug, he'll be happy to answer. But I just wanted to clarify your role versus the DCHC policy board.
And we do have the funds set aside and budgeted in our work program to make these purchases. Just to follow up on that, we're trying to look at multi-year commitments in the future so we don't have to come back regularly. We have a little bit more price stability, as you know, changing very dramatically right now. And also trying to leverage ways that we can partner with not just the members that comprise DCHC, but all of our members throughout the regional council on how we can leverage some of these resources to help with everyone's needs.
Place it on consent agenda.
Okay. Thank you, Doug. All right, so we have a consent agenda now with the addition of remix software. So I think, okay, I'll read it. They're listed here. Let's just do it that way. I'd like, is there a motion to approve
Move to approve the consent agenda as amended. I'll second that.
Ms. Evans? All right, now pass it over to Beth for a roll call vote.
All righty. Just a reminder, 1 vote per jurisdiction. Aberdeen.
Aberdeen, Will Mulaney votes aye.
Anger. Apex.
Brett Gant, aye.
Archer Lodge. Benson.
Aye.
Broadway.
Broadway votes aye.
Scarborough.
Aye.
Carthage. Cary. Chatham County. Layton. City of Durham. Durham County.
Aye.
Fuquay Varina. Hillsborough.
Kathleen Ferguson, Hillsborough, aye.
Holly Springs.
Holly Springs, Tim Forrest, aye.
Johnston County.
Aye.
Kenley. Nightdale. Lee County.
Bill Carver, aye.
Micro.
Katie Garcia, Town of Micro, aye.
Moore County. Morrisville.
Aye. Sorry. It's been a long day.
Orange County. Pine Level. Pinehurst.
Pinehurst, aye.
Pittsburgh.
Pam's on mute.
Pam, you're on mute. Princeton.
Princeton, aye.
Raleigh. Robbins. Rollsville. Sanford. Selma.
Byron McAllister, aye.
Siler City.
Aye.
Smithfield.
Andy Moore, Smithfield, aye.
Southern Pines. Bass. Wake County.
Susan Evans, aye.
Wake Forest.
Nick Slowinski, Wake Forest, aye.
Wendell. Whispering Pines. Wilson's Mills.
Wilson's Mills, aye.
Zebulon.
Shannon Baxter, aye.
All right, it carries.
Thank you, Beth. Now to Lee for the executive director's report.
I have talked enough tonight. No reports, sir.
Okay, next is the chair's report. I'm just excited to be serving this board as the chair and looking forward to working with all of you guys. I had it around the region. I think we're all tired and I'm gonna skip it. But for next time, same question, okay? Is just think about it for however long the next meeting is. What is one new item in this year's budget that you are most excited about? And I'm gonna call on folks next time to do this. Okay? So anyway, thank you so much. We have a motion to
Move to adjourn.
adjourn. Thank you, Ms. Ferguson. Second. I heard a second. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, guys. I'm tired.
Good to see you as well.
I'm really tired right now doing this. It's hard. I'm really tired.